Coaches, welcome back to FCA Coaches Corner, episode 9. Joined today by Keith and Aaron. My name is Ty. We all serve with FCA. We are moving more towards a twice-a-month format this summer, just to slow things down a little bit, give you a chance to go back and take a look at some of our former episodes. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Kansas FCA, so you're updated on all the new episodes that come out. Today, we are joined by Coach Mark Potter, former head coach at Newman University, and now has transitioned into some speaking opportunities. So, Coach, thanks so much for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on here this morning. So hopefully we can continue to impact others, and just look forward to the opportunity to be able to, to answer some of these questions you guys are going to ask, and hopefully, just be able to lead us where we need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start off right off the bat with your coaching journey. I know you we were talking beforehand. You kind of resurrected that Newman University program. That was your alma mater, and you spent, I think, 19 years there. You said. What's been your coaching journey? What got you into coaching, and then maybe kind of catch us up on what you're doing right now in your life.
So I grew up small town Kansas. I grew up in Sedan, Kansas, and we had in Sedan, at least, the legendary coach down there that I played for, football, basketball, and baseball, and sports was kind of always my life. It was a huge growing up as a little kid, and then sports in high school, and then another 2 sports for in college. Played basketball and baseball, and it's something that I just loved. I loved the competitive side of it. I loved, and I'd probably, and don't get me wrong, I mean, you get in it to obviously impact the kids that are playing for you, the athletes that are playing for you, but probably wasn't the only reason when I was a young coach. It was, unfortunately, I can't tell you that I was a perfect coach for sure. It was just something that was in my blood, and it was also something that I knew. And I was a young Christian. I became a Christian when I was 8 years old. So I grew up in the church, and that was always a top priority for my family and myself. That being said, as I went out to be coach, and I was a high school coach, head coach for 11 years. So right out of college, I had the opportunity to be a head coach, basketball coach over here in Cheney, where my wife and I live today, which is just about 30 minutes west of Wichita. And then I went to Cape Mount Carmel for 5 years as a head coach there, and then Wichita South for 1 year. So I was a high school coach for 11 years. So I think I can hopefully be able to relate to a lot of the people that are on here today about the high school side of it, as well as any questions they might have about the college side of it as well. So my journey has been all sports. I mean, it's been literally all sports. It's been in my blood all of my life. I love to compete, and obviously as you get older and you mature as a coach, and you continue to do the things that you do, you realize the importance of impacting those young kids that you have each and every day, and what that really means. So that's just a quick background. I'm married for 36 years to my high school sweetheart. We're both on the FCA board area, and FCA was a huge part of my life when I was growing up in high school and also in middle school. My parents took my older brother, who's 9 years older, to Colorado, to Estes Park, to way older than what you guys are in terms of, the Tom Landrys of the world. And those people were speaking back in those days. And so I have a lot of incredible memories about FCA and what it did for me and my family. And the sports world, obviously, has just been a huge part of my life. So we have 2 children, 33 and 30 now. We have 3, most importantly, we have 3 granddaughters. And they're 5, 2, and like 1.5, something like that. So they keep us hopping and keep us busy. And now I'm in the speaking world. I've been doing that for 3 years full time. I literally got out of coaching because I felt a calling on my life to be able to impact other people through the message that I felt God was calling me to give to other people. And that's maybe something we'll talk about here in a little bit, but that's my story is about depression and anxiety and what I went through as a head college basketball coach in the midst of a basketball season. And, missed 8 games and 28 practices that season because of depression. And literally it changed my life. I spent 15 years ago now and really been on a mission to try to talk openly and honestly about that. And that's what my wife and I do now. We travel the state of Kansas where we live, as well as we've been traveling the nation to speak openly and honestly about this particular topic, one that is a popular topic, unfortunately, in this day and age. And that being said, if we get an opportunity, maybe we can, speak a little more on that as we go forward this morning.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to unpacking that a little bit. We heard you speak at our FCA camp about this topic, and I think it's a much needed conversation. So I'm looking forward to that. Real quick before I pass it off to Keith, you had mentioned that you spent years in high school and college level. So what's been the main difference you think, aside from obviously you got to recruit at the college level, got more time with the kids, but from your experience there, what was the biggest difference that you saw from high school to college level?
Yeah, I mean, the high school, you have to, whether you win or lose on Tuesday or Friday night when you're coaching, you walk into that classroom at 8 o'clock the next morning, those kids really don't care, so you have to be able to kind of balance the two, so to speak, a little bit more than you do at the college level. And I say that from there's a lot more stress and pressure, in my opinion, on high school teachers and coaches from just a daily stress standpoint. You're responsible for a lot of other things. And so I just remember, it was my first 11 years that I coached that, the hardest part for me was to separate those types of things. And, I wasn't very good at it. I'll be real honest with you. And so I had to focus on it and work on it, and, just, be able to be hopefully a really good teacher, when you those classrooms, really give those kids all of your attention for the time that they need. And then, when school's out, you head to your basketball practice or your football, whatever it is you're coaching, and you get after it and try to separate those two. So I just think that's a really tough thing sometimes. And I was just a teacher and a health teacher. So, I mean, there's many people probably on here this morning that, have major preparation for their classes that they teach, along with being coaches, whether it be center or head coaching, the preparation they have for that. So there's a ton of difference. At the college level, you get 24/7 to focus on what you're trying to do. And I'm not going to try to downplay. The college level has a different kind of stress to it. And, the recruiting world and being on the road a lot and all those types of things obviously is a different kind of stress. But there's a huge stress level at the high school level as well. In middle school, whatever level you teach. So my wife's a full-time, she was a 32-year educator in the elementary education. She was in K through 2 for I think 20 of those years maybe, and then maybe 22 of those years, and then she became a reading specialist for 10 years. So my whole entire family have been in education all of our lives. So pretty much every level. So.
That's good. Go ahead, Keith. Pass it off to you.
All right, Coach. So you kind of told us about your growing up in church, but I want to expand on that a little more. Tell us how Jesus became important to you and how you implement it in your coaching. Tell us about that.
As I said earlier, I became a Christian when I was old, and little church down, I told you I grew up in Sedan, Kansas, and my family went to Chautauqua Baptist Church, which was about 8 miles from there, a little small Baptist church down in a small community just down by the Oklahoma line. Actually, we're still in Kansas, but we were in church every Sunday morning, every Sunday evening, and then also on Wednesday evenings. So I grew up in the church, and it was a very, very important part of my life, and as well as FCA was. But when coaching, when you're a Christian coach, and I was a head coach for 30 years, and I wish I could, be on here this morning and say, man, I was phenomenal at my faith every day, and I was phenomenal at being the greatest Christian coach there ever was. And I can tell you that I wasn't even close to that. So that being said, and I did this really all of my coaching career. I can remember always prior to walking into a practice, I would take about a minute or 2 minutes, and I would just say a short prayer, and I would ask God to give me the strength, give me the courage, give me the knowledge, give me the wisdom to truly impact those players that I was getting ready to coach that day. And so anytime you have, that on your mind, you hope that it will allow you to coach from a Christian standpoint versus from a personal standpoint. And unfortunately, there were many times when I was, one of my greatest, regrets as a coach is not that I had great intensity level, because I had great intensity level, but that sometimes that intensity level got in the way of really my Christian principles. And, I never swore, I never cussed at my guys. I mean, that was something that, I would never do just because of the way I was raised. That being said, I could rip, player up one side and down the other pretty easily. And not that that's a bad thing sometimes. I think obviously how we do that's pretty important. But those things were on my mind a lot. And I can remember leaving practices and leaving games and saying, man, if somebody didn't know me, I wonder what their thoughts were about how I was responding on the sideline, either to my players or to the officials. And there were many times I failed at that. And that being said, it was on my mind a lot. So if I failed in one game or one practice, then it was something that I focused on the very next day to try to make sure that I, executed, being a better Christian man and most importantly, a better Christian coach.
Coach, you said that, what's it, 3 years you said that you retired and you've been doing okay. So you said, you felt a call from God to transition to that. And so if you don't mind, kind of go through you said it's been 15 years. I think if I didn't mistake, to where you had that episode or whatever. I don't know if that's the best word to call it, but you had that depression, anxiety. If you don't mind just kind of going through that, a few minutes to kind of unpack what happened there, and then to kind of educate the coaches, because some people might know your story, some people might not, but what you're doing now and how you're doing that. So, that's one of the biggest things we wanted to talk with you about. And obviously you've had a great coaching career, but right now what God's got you doing is, again, speaking and educating people about the mental health and so forth. So if you don't mind, just spend a few minutes, again, talking about your experience with that and then what you're doing now.
Yeah. So it was at the beginning of that basketball season, and I was in my 19th year as a head coach when it happened. And, there really wasn't a lot of things that, that maybe, if you can put a finger on it, so to speak, that maybe created the depression, that, we always look back on it and said, okay, why in the world that particular season did that happen? And we don't always know the answers to that. All I know is this, that my anxiety level was extremely high going into that season. And here's the ironic thing about it. The year before, we had won 25 games. We'd been ranked in the top 20. I was at my alma mater. I had zero pressure really from administration. Things were going extremely well for me as a head coach. I have a wonderful wife and, 2 wonderful children. And really there wasn't a lot of things that was a huge negative. But any coach that's on here knows the significance of the pressure that we put on ourselves. And sometimes it's pressure we get from other people too. I mean, obviously, it's a tough gig to be in the public and, to sometimes you take a beating, from the fans. It may not be outwardly. It could be through an email that you get or a text. Nowadays, the social media thing is so much different than what it was even 15 years ago when I was going through this. But, I just remember really feeling a lot different. And that at the beginning of that season, when the practice started that season, that's when I started to know something wasn't quite right. And just quickly, I go through a couple of the things that happened to me in the first. So we start practice in college level around October 1. But back then we were NAIA, and so you're allowed to start practice on October 1st. And I started to lose confidence as a coach. And keep in mind, I was in my 19th year as a head coach, so I'd gone through the same thing for a lot of years. I lost approximately 30 pounds in about the next 5.5, 6 weeks leading up to the first regular season game. I started to sleep more, which during seasons and, as a head coach, I slept, I probably averaged about 4 hours of sleep a night during the seasons. And as I was starting to go through the depression, I was starting to sleep a lot more, couldn't get enough sleep. I mean, my body was kind of shutting down. And so I was really, my anxiety level, the only way I can describe that to coaches is it was about 100 times more than what it had been in the previous, 18 years that I was a head coach. And so every little small problem that may take place throughout the course of a day seemed like it was just overwhelming to me. And the depression side of it, when there's a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that's what it is, there's a serotonin level in the brain that starts to drop. And when that starts to happen, we start to think differently than we ever thought before. And I want to touch on, from a Christian perspective, where I was at in the midst of all of this. I can remember saying to myself, why can't I, I need to pray more. I need to do a better job. I need to read my Bible more. I need to just be a better Christian in general, right? And so I've had guilt. And I always read my Bible, and I always prayed. And I was, again, I never just, said, okay, you know what, God's over here, and I'm going to do my thing. And that was never a part of me. God, my relationship with Jesus Christ has always been a part of what I tried to accomplish as a coach. And in the midst of the depression, that was, I felt guilty. I felt like, my goodness, why can't I pray this away? Why can't I read the Bible and be a better Christian man and have more faith and all of that stuff. And I don't know if I shared this when I talked at the spring conference, but one of the things that happened to me when I was in the midst of this was that I received a phone call. One of my players' dad was a minister. And in the midst of going through depression, and when I wasn't with my team for those 8 games and 28 practices, I got a phone call. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't look at the computer for the first 3 weeks I was home. I was really, really, really sick. And I got this phone call from this pastor and from my player's dad. And he said, Coach, he said, I just want to tell you something. He said, you need to know something that's really important. He said, it's not because of your lack of faith that you're going through this. And I really needed to probably hear that. And it doesn't mean that we don't need to have more faith. It didn't mean that I didn't need to have more faith. But I needed to hear that maybe from a pastor, just because I did feel guilty. I just felt like there was something that wasn't right in my life, and I didn't know why. And that really helped kind of give me a little bit of peace as I was kind of going through this, trying to figure out, how to get out of this depression thing. But I think sometimes as Christian coaches and as Christians in general, I also had another pastor where they brought me into the church, and it was a large church in Wichita. And he said, Coach, there's one thing I want you to make sure you make, that you tell our congregation. He said, we as Christians a lot of times feel like, you know what, you shouldn't be taking medication because you have your Christian walk, and that should be enough, basically. And he said, I want you to make it loud and clear to our audience today that if that's what, God puts doctors on this earth to help us. God put medication on this earth to help us. There's a lot of other factors that are involved with what we're doing. And so I guess I make that statement today from a Christian coaching standpoint that, you know what, I'm still on medication today, and kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit here. But I think it's important for us to understand that, you know what, sometimes we go through things in life and we don't understand why, and we don't even necessarily have to understand why. But I think God wants to address it. There's many ways in which God may want us to address it, but God puts things in front of us that sometimes is right out there, and all we have to do is reach out and get it. And hopefully something that I say today will maybe touch somebody else, and maybe they'll touch somebody differently as well. But that's why I had the calling to do what I'm doing today, is that, when I was in the midst of kind of figuring out what I was going to do, I wouldn't tell my wife, and obviously she started seeing the signs and symptoms of me struggling with depression. But I was stressed out every year that I ever coached. Another one of my greatest regrets is that, way too much emphasis on, my priorities wasn't always, probably in the right order. Not probably. They weren't always in the right order. I would be checked out a lot of times when I would get home because I would be consumed with what was happening with my team. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be, great at what we do, but I was always consumed. And I do think that, a lot of people can debate what they think about this. I do think that was one of the reasons that God kind of allowed me to go through this, was because, I just put way too much emphasis on, trying to, have my team ready every single day. And the emphasis meaning it wasn't there wasn't anybody was going to outwork me. I was always going to work hard. I was always going to put the time, the efforts in. I was always going to do it passionately. But one of my greatest regrets is that I was checked out a lot when I was home with my family. And, I tell all of my assistant coaches, that are in this business, that's when you get home, man, I just hope and I pray that all coaches will be able to understand and recognize the importance of, being present for their family. And I completely, I regret a lot of that. Obviously nothing I can do about it now, but I do believe that was a part of me going through some of it. And I still wasn't great after going through it. I mean, it was a struggle for me. And, it's, as I was going through, I'm going to go quickly here, but as I was going through the depression and leading up to that first regular season game that season, I was starting to plummet with my thoughts. And one of the things that's a really difficult thing for me to tell people when I speak, but I have to be real and I have to be upfront with them, is that I actually had suicidal thoughts. As a Christian man, as a Christian coach, I'm going to get emotional when I say that, because we think that we have, we're invincible, and we think that because of the position sometimes that we're in, we have to have this tough interior and exterior to show people that we're just strong and that we have no issues and that we're in control. And I was far from in control, even though I was trying to show people I was, as a head coach, as a father, as a husband, as a Christian man. I truly wasn't. I was really struggling with a lot of, just internal thoughts and things that I didn't understand why. And so, to make a long story short, it finally led up to the point where my wife noticed that, I started to have tears a lot more. My wife had seen me cry one time in our 21 years of marriage. We'd known each other for 30 years. I mean, I started calling her when I was in 7th grade. So she'd seen me cry one other time. And then as I was leading into the depression, it was starting to become severe depression. She would see me crying in my chair, at home. And so it started to become severe. And she saw that there was a major issue. And I'm not going to go into all of that today, but my wife finally decided, I got to do something about this. And so she got on the horn, and we were literally the day before our season was starting. And I had really, from day one of practice for about 5.5 weeks, kind of just slowly but surely plummeted into severe depression. And she set up the doctor's appointment, and we got to the doctor, and they told me, "Hey, coach, you're severely depressed. We're going to keep you home for a while until you can get better. We're going to put you on antidepressants." And that's what happened to me. And I stayed home it was almost 6 weeks, and I missed 8 games and 28 practices. And as the medication really started to kick in, about the first 3 weeks, I thought, I was getting worse before I was getting better. And finally, the medication really started to kick in, and I started to get better. And after about 6 weeks, was able to be released to go back to coach my team. And so really, from that point, I have to tell one other story that leads to the question that you asked. So I apologize for the lengthy story here, but the reason that I feel the calling to do what I do today is because when I got back to my team, and I wasn't going to tell anybody about what I had been home. Matter of fact, my AD and my 2 assistant coaches and my personal family are the only ones that knew why I was at home. They didn't know. My team didn't even know why I wasn't with them, because I was telling, do not tell people why I'm not with them. I was embarrassed. I felt, major guilt that I couldn't handle my, daily issues during that time. And when I got back to my team, I felt like I owed it to them to tell them why I hadn't been with them. And so we were on my very first trip back with the team, heading to Washburn University in 2-hour trip from Wichita to Topeka. And that's when my freshman in the front seat said, we got to talking about different things. And he just said, "Hey, Coach, when you told us about that, reporter, there was a reporter that had sent me an email, and I checked my emails, and he asked me if he wanted to be the first one to talk to me about why I hadn't been with my team when I was going through the depression." And I told him, I said, "I'm not talking to you or anybody else about it." And that freshman asked me why. And he said, "Coach, I think it'd be pretty cool if you did." And that changed my life that day, because I got home and I told my wife about that, and we prayed about it. And then we decided as a family that we were going to tell that sports writer everything that had gone on, because I felt the calling at that point in time to do it. And that freshman that told me that day, he'd already been through depression. He got it. He understood it. So what he knew, and this is a message I hope everybody hears today, but what he knew was that if I shared my own personal journey with it, that it would touch a lot of other people. He'd already been through it himself. He understood that. He got that. And so he was right. When that story came out, just got inundated with people, over 400 people in 48 hours of people that were, thanking me for putting the story out there. And that's been 15 years ago. And so I've really been on a mission and on a journey. My wife and I have been ever since then. And so 3 years ago, when I felt the calling, I was a head coach for 30 years. I coached over 800 games. It was all I did in my life. And yet, God said, "You know what? I think this is the path that you need to go down, because there's a reason, little did you know there was some reasons I put you through this, years ago." And it's been an unbelievable journey. We were in the fall, and unfortunately COVID put a stop to some of our travels, to all of our travels right now. But we were in 8 states in 8 different weeks in the fall. And we talked to universities, we talked to community colleges, we talked to high schools, middle schools. We could go all the way down to 5th grade. And I tell you that because I want people to understand. They're like, "Well, who can handle the story that Coach is getting ready?" I can tell you that, the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 44 in our society is suicide. 10 to 44. And so 10, I think that's 4th grade, or maybe 5th grade, I guess, maybe what it is. And so our story can potentially impacts all the way down to however, many people say, "Well, Coach, how low can we go?" And I always tell them, at least to middle school, I said, we know that. And so we've talked all the way down to 6th grade kids, all the way up to, college kids, and then many organizations that asked us to come and that type of thing. So I know that was a little bit of a longer story, but that I needed to kind of give the background so people would really understand why I'm so passionate about doing what we do today. And so we simply, I want people to also understand, I want them to share their story with maybe it's just their family. It doesn't have to be publicly like I do, but maybe it's just with their family, about some of the struggles that they may go through, so that they'll understand, we're all human beings. We all have struggles. We're not always in control of what we do, even though we may want people to portray that we always are. So anyway, there you go, buddy. That's the actual quick version, guys.
Coach, that's awesome. And while we're thinking about it, we'll put the link to your website and everything like that in the notes here. But if people do want to contact you to be a speaker or present to coaches, whatever, what's the best way to do that?
Well, it's either through, our website, and it's d2up.org, the letter D, the number 2, up.org. You can go on our website and find all this information, but I also have my personal cell number on that website, and I will give that personal cell number out today. It's 316-640-9059, and it's 316-640-9059. If somebody wants to contact me, they can do it by my personal cell phone, the one that I'm on right here. We literally get probably once or twice a day, I'll get a phone call or a text from somebody that we have spoken to. Maybe it's recently, or maybe it's been a year or 2 ago. They've kept our phone number, they're struggling, or they need some help to find a way to get their spouse or their son or their daughter some help. we just want to be able to impact as much as possible. And we hope to be able to, this fall, we hope things are going to get back to somewhat some norms, some normal situations. That being said, if not, we're cranking up the virtual world as well. And we know we can impact a lot of people virtually, and we actually, the price that we charge is a lot less virtually. So, and we always negotiate with people anyway. So, yes, we make a living doing this now. So we need to, we have to get paid at some point, but, obviously we do it because we love to do it. And it's really our calling. So, it's been a great thing for my wife and I to be able to travel the United States and be able to impact a lot of people, but we also love impacting right here in our own state of Kansas as well. So, but we'd love to go anywhere and everywhere to be able to impact in regards to mental health. So it's probably the number one, not probably, I mean, every administrator would tell you it's the number one priority, for people to, we know how serious a problem it is in our society today with mental health. So there you go.
That's so powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I got a couple questions. First one a little bit quicker, second one a little bit longer, but you talked about sharing, you talked about that freshman challenge and you to share. What did that do for you as a coach to be able to connect with your team that way? Because I'm assuming you had that conversation with your team if you had it with the reporters. Do you feel like you were able to connect with them on a deeper level, or maybe they were able to trust you more? What did that do for you as a coach through that time?
Yeah, great question. It was, like I said, I was going to try to protect, I wasn't even going to tell my team, initially. And, when I went back to coach my team, I felt like I did owe it to them to tell them the entire story. And I told them everything. And, it was another level of communication. It was I can remember being in a practice probably about a week after I returned to my team, after telling them the story of why I hadn't been with them. And I remember, I got it. One of my best players, his name was Cole Elliott. And I can't remember what he did in practice, but I ripped him pretty good. And he just smiled at me. And I'm like, what are you smiling at, dude? Like, what are you doing? And he just, coach, he says, I'm just happy to have you back, man. You're just yourself again. And so I guess that'll kind of answer your question. Like, there's a deeper relationship with those players once they understand that you're human, and that you will be vulnerable enough to share with them something that's the most personal thing that you have. And I can't overstate that. I mean, whether it's depression or whether it's something else that's, really personal in your life, the vulnerability is what really allows them to understand, listen, coach really cares about us because he's telling us things he didn't tell us, that he wouldn't tell just anybody or everybody, and that he'll relate to us on a level that he's never related to us before. So, when we talk about developing a relationship with players, you talk about, I learned so many things throughout those years, because from that point on, I mean, I told every team about what I had gone through. And I do believe that I had a much different level of relationship with most of the players that played for me after that, because they just know that, we as coaches sometimes, and, I could say this, we as fathers sometimes, we just have this thing that we're trying to protect, our ego that we're trying to protect. And yeah, there's a time and a place where we got to, and I think most people can probably tell, I was an intense coach, I got after it every day, and nobody was going to ever question my work ethic. And yet, when we can sit down and have a conversation about whatever it is personally with one of our players, there is just no price you can put on that. No price you can put on, because then they know that you truly care about them if you'll share just something with them that's a little bit vulnerable about who you are and where you've been. So whether it's, depression, like, in my case, or whether it's something else that's a little bit personal, it's that personal relationship that's going to, at the end of the day, truly impact those players that you're talking about, those athletes that we're talking about. So hopefully that answers that question.
It definitely answers it. We were on a FCA call yesterday, and one of our staff said proximity breeds intimacy. And I just think it's so true that you're getting vulnerable, and it leads to more intimacy with your team. Second question I got is a little bit more personal, and I'm glad that you shared with about that pastor I'm so glad that he spoke truth into your life about, man, this is not a lack of faith. Because I think there's such a stigma sometimes attached in the Christian community. And when we're going through, mental health problems or physical health or economic struggles, whatever that is, that somehow that means I need to pray more. That means I need to, and of course you said we need to grow in our faith, but that, I think about the Apostle Paul. When you were talking, I was thinking about 2 Corinthians 12, when he talks about this thorn that he had in his flesh, and he prayed 3 different times for it to be removed. And then he said that God responded, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness." And he says, "Therefore, I'm going to boast in my weaknesses so that the power rests on God and not on me." And so the question I have, I guess, is what did God teach you through that time? What did that do for your personal walk with Jesus? And what did he do in your heart through that time? That's a little bit personal, so you can get
No.
if you want to, but yeah, I've just seen that in my own life. I know we all have our own stories to share with that we're going through struggles. When we're comfortable, we're not really growing, right? Discomfort breeds growth. So,
That's right.
So yeah, what did God do in your heart through that time, and what he's still maybe doing in your heart?
You talked about boasting in your weaknesses. Like when I was a young coach and trying to figure it all out, and even after 30 years, I didn't have to figure it all out. But as a young coach, it's like you don't want your players to know that you may not have every answer. And as you get older, you start to recognize how important it is that they know that you don't have every answer. So one of the greatest things that I learned was, just being able to be more vulnerable with my guys, number one. Number two, just having more peace in my heart, because I knew that, I can't control. There's another part of this that we call mental toughness in the sports world, right? And that part of that mental toughness is, how do we handle the stresses that we're dealing with each and every day? Well, great sports psychologist by the name of, world-renowned sports psychologist by the name of Dr. Spencer Wood gives a strategy. And the strategy in a nutshell is this. And this is answering your question, okay? But I struggled with thinking about things that I could not control all the time. Just wasted time, wasted effort, stress level high, because thinking, man, is my team ready? All the things that you worry about, right? Well, if we would document, and this is the strategy that I'm speaking of, I'm going to go really quick with this, but if we would document for 3 days, I would challenge anybody listening today to document our worries, everything that we worry about, for 3 days. So do it in the evening, take 10 minutes, anything that you might worry about. And then after those 3 days, you go down and you take a pen and you check off each and every one of those things that you cannot control. Anything that you can't control, you just check it off. Boom, boom, boom. You check it off the list. And what most people find is that we worry about 90% of the things that we worry about, we can't control. Really felt like God helped me in that area. It was this major stress and anxiety that I felt that kind of led into the depression. And then God said, "Listen, coach, you're wasting your time and effort so much on things that you can't control. Let's try to put the effort and your wisdom and things that you have into things that you can control." And so I felt like, through Dr. Spencer Wood, like I said, he puts people in your life to truly change and help you get through the things that are true struggles, which obviously that was a major struggle in my life. And I had an opportunity to get to know Dr. Spencer Wood. Our son was a professional golfer, and so he actually worked with my son while he was trying to make it in pro golf, and he was out there for 5 years, and that's a whole nother story. But the mental toughness side of it was a huge part of helping me have a lot more peace. That Dr. Spencer Wood, by the way, grew up in London, whole entire family atheist. He came to the United States. One of his teammates, he's a basketball player, asked him to go to a Bible study. He said, "I go to the Bible study." He said, "What are these people talking about?" Like, he had only been brought up in a family of atheists, entire family. And he said, I started to I started to see the love and the heart of the people that were going to that. That touches me, you know, just because we sometimes don't have any idea what we might do for somebody else by just simply reaching out and inviting them to a Bible study or to FCA, right? And as coaches, we're like, yeah, you know, maybe I shouldn't be quite as aggressive. But you know what? I think, and that's the devil talking right there. Like, we need to make sure that we're getting out there inviting, because Dr. Spencer Wood's a perfect example of a man that was invited to a Bible study. It wasn't officially FCA, but it was kind of like that, he said, even though there wasn't all athletes in it. Long story short, he starts investigating. He starts reading the Bible. He starts investigating. He said, you know what I couldn't do? I couldn't prove that there wasn't a God. He said, so I knew there was. He became a Christian. His entire family is now are Christians. Gives me chills to say that. Why? Because one of his teammates said, hey, man, come and join me at the Bible study. And this man is he's now the head sports psychologist for the Detroit Tigers. Okay? Like, this man goes from, you know, basically nothing and an atheist man to a Christian man who is touching thousands and thousands of lives. And it was just because one person said, hey, come to the Bible study tonight. So anyway, I don't know how I got to that, but
that's great. That's a great story.
Anyway, yeah. So
Keith or Aaron, you got anything else before I close it out? No. All right. Last question we always try to hit on before we wrap this thing up is just on your legacy. You know, you're a retired coach now, but you think about retirement ceremony or funeral, whatever that is in your mind. But what do you want to be known for? What does Coach Potter want to be known for with the players that you have impacted in your life? And then also now you're traveling around speaking to thousands and thousands of people, sharing your story. What do you want your legacy to be in those people's lives?
Yeah. You know, I when you coach, you know, I was a head coach in over 800 games, and you know, people always say this, and so I hate to just be, but you know, I look back and yes, winning is important, because when you win, people will listen a little more, right? Like, when you're successful, people are going to listen. So I'm not saying that winning isn't important. Everything that, you know, I'm a competitive dog. Okay, I love to win. So all that stuff is important to try to win, but you know, nobody really cares how many games I just won or lost. Nobody really cares about that. They knew I was a coach. I can relate to many people on here because I'm a sports guy, right? So I want to be able to use what God gave me for the platform that I'm supposed to be using for Him, and that is to touch and impact as many people's lives through. And I would hope they would say, man, Coach Potter was high character, high integrity, great Christian man that tried to lead by example each and every day, even though I know I failed miserably in many days. That's what I want him to say, that he impacted so many people, because whether it be through the mental health and obviously through coaching too, and I want to downplay that. I just think we put way too much emphasis on, man, I got to win. At the end of the day, people really don't give a crap about that. They care about who you are and how you impacted them. And so I really would, you know, most importantly, you know, I hope that's what Jesus says about me, is when I do go to heaven and I have that opportunity, you know, what did you accomplish on that earth? You know, what did you do? And many times I did fail, but I hope many times I succeeded in trying to be the best Christian man that I possibly could be. And it's why my wife and I serve on the FCA board. We want to be a part of impacting people's lives through Jesus Christ.
Amen to that. Amen. Coach, thanks a ton for sharing your story. I want to challenge whatever coaches are listening. I want to challenge you. If you were blessed and encouraged by this episode, please share it with the staff that's at your school. You might not struggle with mental health, but this is an issue that I struggle with personally. I know coaches around the state, around the country, around the world are struggling with it as well. And so, and if you were encouraged, share it with your fellow coaches. Coach, thanks so much for joining us. I was really encouraged by our time together this morning.
Thank you so much for asking. I really appreciate it, guys.
Thanks a lot, Coach. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.